I will not tolerate such behaviour. If you want to go out now, but if you stand again, I'll order you out. Make your mind up. Either shut up and get out.
Watch how Kemi Badenoch turns the first PMQs of 2026 into a pressure test Keir Starmer clearly wasn't ready for. No warm-up, no mercy, just Labour on the grill and a Prime Minister scrambling for cover.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, may I welcome the Prime Minister's efforts to advance peace in Ukraine and his joint statement on Greenland. The last few days have seen significant international events. The US operation in Venezuela, threats towards Greenland, and an agreement to put British troops on the ground in Ukraine. So it is frankly astonishing that the Prime Minister is not making a full statement to Parliament today. No Prime Minister, Labour or Conservative, has failed to make a statement to the House in person after committing to the deployment of British troops. His comments about making a statement in due course, quite frankly, are not good enough. It shows a fundamental lack of respect for all of us here and the people we represent. Mr. Speaker, the US is Britain's closest military ally. However, we are clear that the sovereignty of Greenland is sacrosanct. So can the Prime Minister tell us what influence is he bringing to bear with the US administration to ensure that is respected?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, let me be very clear about what was agreed yesterday, because military plans were drawn up some months ago and I've updated the House in relation to that. Yesterday was a political declaration that sits under those military plans. If there were to be deployment, there would have to be a legal instrument. Mr. Speaker, deployment would only be after a ceasefire to support Ukraine's capabilities, to conduct deterrent operations and to construct and protect military hubs. Mr. Speaker, there will be a statement to the House at the earliest opportunity. There could hardly be an opportunity. They claim they want to know about this and they're trying to shout me down. Mr. Speaker, in relation to the House, if there were a decision to deploy under the agreement that was signed yesterday, then I would put that matter to this House for a debate beforehand and for a vote on that deployment. That is consistent with recent practice, and I'll adhere to that.
Mr. Speaker, why is today not the earliest opportunity? The truth is, the Prime Minister does not want everybody in this House to be able to ask him questions. So he leaves it just to Prime Minister's questions half an hour. On Monday, at least his Foreign Secretary stood up for 2 hours and 15 minutes. You know, it was a non-event, but at least she did that. He is scared of us being able to ask him questions. Yes. 6 questions. Yes, he's here.
Please. I've also requested that we do need an early statement. This House should always be informed first. So I don't like the chantering. Let the questions continue.
Well, one of them asked, but he is here. He's got no choice but to be here for Prime Minister's questions. That's why he's here. If he could skip this, we know he would do. But back to the matter at hand, Mr. Speaker. We all agree, all of us here agree, I think most of us here agree, that NATO is the bedrock of our security. The future of Greenland is of fundamental importance to the future of the alliance. And I am sure that the Prime Minister agrees that it is essential for NATO leaders, including and especially the US, to meet. Will the Prime Minister call for an urgent meeting of NATO leaders?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, she says she wants to hear about Ukraine. She's got 6 questions. She's not even asking a second question about what we did yesterday. She's got the opportunity. Mr. Speaker, in relation...
Sorry, can I help the Prime Minister? You don't need to worry about the responsibility of the questions of the opposition. That's the
Mr. Speaker, NATO is the single most important and effective military alliance the world has ever seen. In the 18 months we've been in power, I've done everything within my ability to strengthen NATO. We had one of the strongest NATO meetings last year, the summit, where we had more members of NATO and more unity. When I arrived back to the House to make a statement, which of course she asked for, her position was I shouldn't have missed PMQs, I should have empty-chaired the NATO summit. That's how serious she is about NATO, Mr. Speaker.
You didn't answer the question, Mr. Speaker. I asked him if he would call for an urgent meeting of NATO leaders. We can all see that the situation is moving rapidly. I also note that he has still not had a call with President Trump. That is concerning 4 days after the events in Venezuela. But yesterday, he announced that Britain and France had signed, he says, a political agreement to put troops on the ground in the event of a peace deal in Ukraine. So, given the Prime Minister is not making a statement about that deployment of British troops abroad, one of the most serious decisions a government and a parliament can take, irrespective of what he says, can he at least confirm how many troops would be sent to Ukraine and whether they would be in a combat role?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I was with NATO allies yesterday, all day, in which we were discussing security in Europe, in particular security guarantees for Ukraine, and we made significant progress. And I'm glad that she has welcomed that. Of course, I will speak to President Trump. I spoke to his senior advisers yesterday. We were with them all day. But, Mr. Speaker, she asked me about the deployment. We released the statement yesterday. It's clear from that, but I will be clear with the House that there would only be deployment after a ceasefire. It would be to support Ukraine's capabilities. It would be to conduct deterrence operations and to construct and protect military hubs. The number will be determined in accordance with our military plans, which we are drawing up and looking to other members to support. So the number I will put before the House before we were to deploy. But I'll do more than that. If we went as far as a legal instrument to deploy, which would be necessary, I would then have a debate in this House so all members could know exactly what we're doing, make their points of view, and then we would have a vote in this House on the issue, which, to my mind, is the proper procedure in a situation such as this.
Mr. Speaker, it is clear that the Prime Minister either does not have the detail or does not want to give us the detail. Yes. But this is important. He should be calling an urgent meeting of NATO leaders. He should have spoken to President Trump by now. This is important because if any such peace deal is breached, we would be in direct conflict with Russia. If the Prime Minister is committing troops, he must give more detail on how he intends to ensure our armed forces are fully resourced. Before the budget, the Prime Minister said it was his ambition to spend 3% on defence in the next Parliament. That could be as late as 2034. It is time to move from ambition to commitment. We have now had the budget. So can the Prime Minister now tell us in what year will the UK spend 3% of GDP on defence?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, just on this serious issue she puts to me in relation to security guarantees and the American role and our dialogue with the Americans, I can assure the House I spoke to President Trump twice over the Christmas period in relation to this specific issue, along with members of the E3, along with European allies. That has been a constant course of our discussion. There's no question of acting on this without full discussion with the Americans, and their senior negotiators were there at President Trump's request yesterday and on his instructions, and they were talking to him during the course of yesterday as we negotiated. So to assure the House, because it is a serious position she's putting to me, on the question of security guarantees, there is nothing between the UK and the US, and we've been constantly discussing this over many, many weeks and months. We've made huge progress. I have personally spoken to President Trump about it on 2 occasions since we were last in this House. I do want to reassure her and the House in relation to that really important issue. In relation to defence spend, I'm proud that we're investing to keep our country safe, that we have increased the defence spend. That's provided for in the budget. It's the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the Cold War, and that means, Mr. Speaker, better kit, better housing for our forces and better defence as an engine for growth. Mr. Speaker, that does compare to their record. Ben Wallace, who was on the radio this morning, the longest-serving Conservative Defence Secretary, admitted that on their watch the armed services had been, in his words, hollowed out. And our defence...
Mr Cartledge, you expect a lot. I expect something back, and that's silence. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, they shout shame. I'll pass that on to Ben Wallace. Mr. Speaker, the defence spending that we've put in place is 3 years earlier than the unfunded plan that they left behind at the last election.
Can they not?
Mr. Speaker, I heard what... Oh, wait for it. Yeah. What Ben Wallace said was that spending had fallen under all governments. 3%, the last time, Mr. Speaker, the last time spending was at 3% was under a Conservative government. And yes, while we welcome the increase, something that we supported, can I remind the House that this is a man who sat in the shadow cabinet and tried to make Prime Minister a man who said we shouldn't even be in NATO at all. So I don't need to take any lectures from him. The world is changing. We need to spend more on defence. He did not answer the question about when we would get to 3%, yet he knows up until 2031 how much he's going to be spending on welfare. He doesn't know. That's in the Red Book. The Red Book has no money allocated for defence. We need to move from ambition to commitment. And Mr. Speaker, this is important because this isn't just about money. If the Prime Minister is deploying troops to Ukraine, those troops need to know that we have their backs. Last week, 7 former SAS commanders, 7 former SAS commanders warned that Labour's Northern Ireland Troubles Bill will wreck our special forces. Not me, that's the SAS. In November, 9 retired 4-star generals warned that his bill was a direct threat to national security. And even his own Northern Ireland Veterans Commissioner has said our veterans are being treated worse than terrorists. So, Mr. Speaker, is it not madness to be putting veterans in the dock for serving their country at the same time he is deploying today's soldiers into Ukraine?
Mr. Speaker, that was embarrassing. She said that Ben Wallace was talking about all government. They were in power for 14 years and they hollowed out our armed forces. Copyright Ben Wallace. Secondly, she talks about the shadow cabinet. She has in her shadow cabinet a shadow attorney general who is advising Abramovich at the same time as we are imposing sanctions on Russia and trying to use that money to support Ukraine. How can someone sit in her shadow cabinet advising someone trying to escape sanctions and pretend that their policy is to support us on sanctions? And Mr. Speaker, when it comes to Northern Ireland, they are the party that gave immunity to IRA terrorists, terrorists who killed British soldiers. Their flawed act was struck down by the courts, which left our veterans with no legal protection whatsoever. We're introducing a fair and transparent process with a package of rights and protections for our veterans. And, Mr. Speaker, there is no equivalence between our armed forces who fought bravely in Northern Ireland and terrorist groups. And if the Leader of the Opposition wants to go back, if her position is, to their old flawed legislation and give immunity to the IRA, she should stand up now and say so.
Mr. Speaker, let me start by talking about the Shadow Attorney General. Yes. Yeah. Do they know what the Shadow Attorney General is doing? He is defending veterans pro bono against the actions of this government. On this side of the House, Mr. Speaker. We will defend those who defended us. But why don't we talk about the actual Attorney General who is sitting in Cabinet, the man who defended Jerry Adams, the man who's trying to bring Shamima Begum back into the country, the man who is helping to surrender the Chagos Islands. I will take our shadow Attorney General every day of the week against his Attorney General. Mr. Speaker, we protect our veterans. I want the Prime Minister to know we protect our veterans. What he is doing to veterans is disgraceful. But this is serious, Mr. Speaker. I don't want the House to be under any illusions. I do not want the House to be under any illusions. The Prime Minister should know that we will absolutely support any efforts to help bring peace to Ukraine. We will work with him to ensure NATO remains the bedrock of our security. But we cannot write a blank cheque when he is also surrendering the Chagos Islands, surrendering our veterans to lawfare, and surrendering to his backbenchers by prioritising welfare handouts over defence spending, as if the world has not become more dangerous. So, Mr. Speaker, isn't it time the Prime Minister changed course and for once put the British national interest first?
Now that you've seen that, let's strip away the choreography, the shouting, the procedural theatre and the performative outrage, because what just unfolded in Parliament was not a routine PMQ scrap. It was a stress test, and under pressure, Labour didn't merely wobble. It revealed a pattern that's becoming impossible to ignore. What you witnessed was a government that wants the authority of power without the friction that comes with accountability. A Prime Minister who wants to sound presidential, managerial, international, but who visibly recoils when forced to anchor those words to specifics. And that's why the exchange mattered. Not because of who landed the sharpest line, but because of what Labour tried and failed to keep blurred. This was supposed to be the first PMQs of 2026, where Labour looked settled, calm, in control, a government past the honeymoon phase but not yet tested by history. Instead, it became a reminder that slogans age quickly when they're exposed to scrutiny, especially when the subject is as serious as British troops, foreign deployment, NATO credibility and the risk of direct confrontation with Russia. Labour wants you to believe this is all grown-up governance. Mature decision-making, quiet competence. But competence has a very inconvenient habit. It requires detail, and detail is precisely what Labour keeps pushing into the future. The context here is everything. This exchange didn't happen in isolation. It happened against the backdrop of a government already struggling to reconcile its promises with reality. Defence spending ambitions that stretch comfortably beyond the next election. Welfare budgets locked in years ahead, but military commitments wrapped in fog. A party that campaigned on restoring trust, now asking the public to trust it blindly on one of the gravest decisions a government can make. And notice the imbalance. When it comes to welfare, the numbers are there. When it comes to spending, the spreadsheets are ready. When it comes to defence, suddenly everything becomes provisional, conditional, subject to future instruments, later debates and eventual clarity. Always later, always not quite now. That's not accidental. That's political risk management. Because the moment Labour commits to numbers, timelines and funding, it loses flexibility. And flexibility in this case is being prioritised over transparency. What made this exchange sting wasn't aggression. It was persistence, the refusal to let vagueness pass as reassurance, and that's when the cracks started to show. Because when a government is confident, it answers questions head on. When it isn't, it reframes, deflects and reaches for history as a shield. Watch the pattern carefully. When pressed on NATO urgency, the response becomes a lecture about NATO's greatness. When asked about defence spending timelines, the answer becomes a comparison to Conservative failures. When questioned about troop deployment specifics, the response dissolves into process, procedure and future votes. That's not engagement. That's evasion dressed up as statesmanship. And here's where the satire becomes unavoidable. Labour wants credit for being serious on defence while refusing to be precise about defence. It wants applause for international leadership while avoiding domestic accountability. It wants to sound resolute abroad while hedging carefully at home. It's like watching someone insist they're driving confidently while refusing to tell you where the road leads. The contradictions pile up fast. Labour insists NATO is the bedrock of security, yet can't explain why urgency doesn't require urgency in Parliament. Labour insists it supports the armed forces, yet won't commit to when spending reaches the level military leaders have been warning about for years. Labour insists it's acting responsibly, yet repeatedly delays the very transparency that responsibility demands. And then comes the fallback move. Personalise, politicise and pivot. Suddenly the debate is about shadow cabinet members, past defence secretaries, historical failures, anything except the decisions being made right now by the people currently in charge. This tactic might energise party loyalists, but it doesn't reassure the country. Because voters don't experience defence policy as an abstract debate. They experience it as risk. Risk to lives, risk to security, risk to Britain's credibility on the world stage, and credibility is fragile. Once lost, it doesn't come back easily. What makes this moment particularly damaging for Labour is that it collides directly with the image they worked so hard to build. This was supposed to be the government of seriousness after chaos, the adults after the drama, the calm hands after turbulence. But calm only works when it's underpinned by clarity. Otherwise, it looks less like confidence and more like avoidance. And people notice. They noticed this week, they noticed yesterday, they noticed in the hours after the exchange as clips spread across social media, not because they were entertaining, but because they were revealing. Analysts weren't dissecting zingers, they were questioning substance. Journalists weren't marvelling at rhetoric, they were asking where the numbers were. Inside Parliament too, this won't be forgotten. Backbenchers don't like being asked to defend uncertainty on doorsteps. MPs with military communities don't like explaining why funding promises remain elastic. And party strategists don't like moments that puncture the central narrative of competence. This is how pressure accumulates, not with a single scandal, but with repeated moments where explanations feel incomplete, where answers feel rehearsed but unsatisfying, where leadership feels cautious when decisiveness is expected. And this is where the wider political consequences start to take shape, because defence isn't just another policy area. It cuts across trust, sovereignty and national identity. It's where voters are least forgiving of ambiguity and least patient with delay. If Labour wants to be seen as credible on the world stage, it has to be credible at home. If it wants to deploy force abroad, it has to withstand scrutiny in Parliament. And if it wants public support, it has to earn it with transparency, not manage it with messaging. The problem for Labour is that this exchange fits too neatly into an emerging pattern. Big ambitions, deferred commitments, moral certainty, operational vagueness, strong language, soft timelines. That pattern is manageable early on, but over time it hardens into perception, and perception in politics becomes reality. This wasn't Labour being unfairly attacked. It was Labour being examined. And examinations reveal preparedness, coherence and confidence, or the lack of them. What we saw was a Prime Minister who wanted to control the terms of the debate rather than answer it, who wanted to be seen as responsible without being pinned down, who wanted the optics of leadership without the inconvenience of immediate accountability. But Parliament doesn't operate on optics, and neither do voters. As Britain moves deeper into 2026, the world isn't getting calmer. International instability isn't slowing down. Defence questions aren't going away. And the longer Labour delays clarity, the louder those questions will become. Because when governments ask for trust, they have to give something in return. Not just reassurances, not just comparisons to the past, but facts, timelines and commitments that can be judged. So now that you've seen that exchange, ask yourself honestly, did that feel like control or containment? Did that sound like leadership or reluctance? And if these questions can't be answered clearly in Parliament, when exactly were they supposed to be answered at all? This is how narratives begin to unravel. Not with a bang, but with repeated moments where confidence gives way to caution and clarity is endlessly postponed. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Did Labour look composed or cornered? Share this with someone who watched PMQs and sensed something wasn't right. And if you want more unfiltered